Sold. Sold. Sold.
In recent years, we have seen a dramatic rise in the high-end art market. Transactions are often concealed by the use of offshore companies and free trade zones. Most of the sales take place behind closed doors in private or in manipulated auction rooms. While the secrecy of the market may be exploited legally to avoid publicity or ease cross-border operations, it may also be used for illegal purposes, such as evading taxes and hiding shady ownership histories. Since art is easily transportable, expensive, and poorly regulated, money laundering becomes inevitable. The so-called Panama Papers leaked 11 million files from the law firm Mossack Fonseca, which has given us a deep look of how offshore companies are used to conceal the ownership of art pieces. This is the third and last video on our series on the inner workings of the secretive art market, where we uncover how art investments are used for all the wrong reasons. But before we do that, welcome to Financial Interest, where you will learn everything you need to know about money and investing. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. In 2015, federal agents who raided a drug dealer's house in a suburb of Philadelphia found weed and, to their surprise, $2.5 million in cash stashed in a secret compartment beneath a fish tank. But they were even more surprised to discover so much art. 14 paintings on the walls and another 33 stashed in a storage unit 3 miles away. The artists included Renoir, Picasso, and Salvador Dali. The special agent, Brian Mitchell, would later say that amount of artwork was not something you come across in every investigation. It turned out that the drug dealer Ronald Beliciano used the artworks to launder some of his drug cash. He purchased the paintings from an established gallery near Philadelphia's Museum Row. Beliciano was sentenced to more than 5 years in prison for dealing drugs and laundering money. 4 months after his arrest, Ronald Beliciano returned to Brewster & Co., the Philadelphia gallery where he had bought the paintings. But he was not there to shop for himself. Instead, he introduced the gallery owner, Nathan Eisen, to Lisa, who he identified as a drug dealer with lots of cash to spend on art. Lisa told the owner that she had concerns with buying artworks. From the court transcripts, she said, "I'm willing to invest in stuff like this, but I don't know how to sell it. With cars and other things, I can easily get rid of. But with stuff like this, I'm nervous." The shop owner told her that it's different from selling a car, because a car has to have a registration, the title, and many of the paperwork that come with it. These paintings have nothing. They could have been your grandma's. You follow me? Lisa replied, "So I can just say, this is stuff that I inherited, not that I bought." Nathan would go on to say, "Right, you can just say you have found it in a thrift store and they were $10 a piece." A few weeks after their first conversation, Lisa returned to the gallery to buy 12 Salvador Dali lithograms for $20,000. The cash was in a brown paper bag, which smelled of drugs. She went on to tell the gallery owner it's because she kept it next to her weed stash. Nathan told her that she was not getting an invoice for her purchases. "No receipt, no invoice. I'm good with that. That's the way I like to do business," Lisa said. As Nathan was walking her out of the gallery, their last exchange was, "We've never seen each other before." The gallery owner had not been accused of wrongdoing in Beliciano's case. But as a result of his conversation with Lisa, who was an undercover agent wearing a wire, he would later be charged with money laundering and plead guilty in 2015. He was sentenced to 320 hours of community service and received a $15,000 fine. Unfortunately, this is not the only case where art galleries are also in on the action. In 2017, a similar but larger-scale case happened in London. Matthew Green, who is the son of the prominent London-based dealer Richard Green and the owner of Richard Green Gallery, was involved in a multi-million-dollar money laundering scheme. His client, who had previously been engaged in stock manipulation fraud, was in desperate need to launder his money. The money was, of course, hidden away in an offshore account. Green would go on to create fake acquisition and ownership papers, indicating several artworks had been sold to the offshore company. The artworks used in this case were highly valuable pieces such as Picasso's. In reality though, the paintings were not moving at all, sitting in the same old storage unit. Down the road, he would pretend to buy it back from the shell company at a lower price, while keeping 5 to 10% of the laundered cash for himself. The tactics used by Green in the Picasso scheme remain easy to replicate. Green was taking advantage of the regulatory loopholes that the US and European legislators are working hard to close. Unlike banks, casinos, currency exchanges, and even precious metals dealers, auction houses and art sellers have no obligation to report large-scale cash transactions to governing authorities. In fact, dealers can keep the names of their buyers and sellers anonymous. And unlike the US businesses that deal with large sums of money, they do not have to file the so-called suspicious activity report with the US Treasury when they have doubts about the origin of the money they're being paid. As briefly mentioned in our last video, the growing influence of banking services in the art world is only making the problem worse. And the loans provided against art portfolios are an important part of most of the money laundering schemes. It all starts with some sort of illegal money placed in a shell company that is registered in a tax haven. That shell company is most likely owned by several others. The more layered the ownership structure of these companies, the harder it is to trace the true owner. That company then goes on to buy some high-end art pieces and sends them immediately to a free port. At this point, the money is already cleaned and put in the system. But there's another important problem. People looking to launder money usually want that laundered cash as soon as possible and not have it tied down to an investment for several years. Therefore, the next logical step is to go to a bank and pretend to be a high-end art collector by showing off their multi-million-dollar prestigious portfolio and ask for a loan against it. The banks claim to do due diligence on both the person and the company, but we all know how that usually turns out. No matter how shady the person or his money is, the loans are usually approved, as the banks only lend up to 50% of the value of the painting, keeping them always on the safe side even in the case of default. And once the loan is confirmed, the transaction is complete. The money is perfectly laundered, and the fraudster can happily invest and spend the loan. And after a couple years, they will likely sell the painting within the free port, free of taxes as well as any reporting standards, and pay back their loan. Well, this is exactly what Joe Low did, the man that defrauded the Malaysian Sovereign Welfare Fund 1MBD for $4.5 billion. His Cayman Island shell company, Tanor Finance, opened an account with Christie's in May 2013. Over the next 2 months, he purchased 7 artworks for about $137 million. His company also bought a Jean-Michel Bastique for $48.8 million, which was an auction record for the artist at the time, well above the estimated target of $25 million. Then in March 2014, Low started looking for a loan. That month, Low wrote in an email to the dealer that sold him a Monet painting and said he prefers boutique banks that can move fast versus large ones like JP Morgan. The dealer responded to his email the next day by saying, "Can take all the art, no problem." Low replied, "All in Geneva Freeport. Speed is the most important, and one with a fairly quick and relaxed KYC process." The dealer was Sotheby's, where he had purchased half of its collection from, which a month later would approve the loan. Sotheby's is not a bank, which therefore isn't subject to the same money laundering scrutiny by regulators. But their subsidiary, Sotheby's Financial Services, can give out loans against artworks. Low pledged 17 paintings valued between $191 to $258 million to secure a $107 million loan. The loan was obtained by 888 Limited, a Cayman Island entity fully owned by Joe Low. As high-end art prices skyrocketed, Sotheby's and other firms have become shadow banks, giving out millions of dollars of legal loans outside the regulated financial system, which arguably facilitate money laundering schemes such as this. Sotheby's has given out $5.5 billion in loans, which has grown 12-fold since it started. According to Deloitte's Art and Finance report from 2019, art-secured lending has been growing by 20% per year for the last decade and has now reached $35 billion in the US alone. banks offer loans to top art collectors, such as billionaire trader Stevie Cohen and casino magnate Steve Wynn, charging interest rates as low as 1%. Billions of dollars of art changes hands every year with little to no public scrutiny. Buyers typically have no idea where the work they're purchasing is coming from, and sellers are similarly in the dark about where the work is going. And none of the purchasing requires the filing of paperwork that would allow regulators to easily track art sales or profits. A distinct difference from the way the government can review the transfer of other substantial assets, like stocks or real estate. The secrecy, anonymity, and lack of regulation creates an environment ripe for money laundering and evading sanctions. Art world experts who associate anonymity with discretion, tradition, and class believe that the siege on secrecy is an overreaction that will damage the market. They worry about alienating customers with probing questions. The president of the Art Dealers Association of America said at a recent industry panel that it's going to be a lot of paperwork and a whole lot of compliance, and I don't think we will extinguish much of a problem. Still, there is no question that the art market has exploded in value, where paintings routinely sell for $10 to $20 million, often as much as the penthouses in which they hang in. Though the profits of these sales are subject to capital gains tax of 28%. The IRS's ability to track who is accurately reporting the windfalls is something of a struggle. Even figuring out who sold what is a hurdle. Half of the purchases are in private, with so many transactions and their prices never revealed to the public. Recent studies have projected that there could be substantial tax evasion by the richest Americans. While there is no evidence of widespread cheating involving the art market, experts say that it's clear that the secrecy of the market creates vulnerabilities, especially in the current structure where the enforcement system rarely conducts audits and relies heavily on the willingness of the collectors to report their profits. Crystal McCarden, a professor at Tulane Law School who specializes in tax code law, said, "The only ones who know the inner workings of the secret of art market are you, the art gallery, and God." If you made it this far, I hope you liked our 3-part series on the high-end art market. Let us know down in the comments what other interesting financial topics you would want us to cover next. If you want to support the channel, don't forget to subscribe and give it a big like, and I'll see you all next week.